Welcome to the Vol Bros. My name is Evan. This is my brother Rustin, and we are two Vol Bros who are actually bros. And man, oh man, what a day it was. If you had tickets to the baseball and softball games today on Rocky Top, because baseball continued their series against Vanderbilt in game two, softball started their series against Florida. Both of them were ranked opponents, and both of them got annihilated today. Tennessee brought, well, I was going to say brought the wood, but I guess brought the alloy metal. And I mean, they were hitting the ball all over the place. Let's start off with the baseball team, 17-1 win. I think they said there was a total of 11 runs scored with 2 outs, I think is what it was, all throughout the game.
Yep.
And now let me also say this: 17-1 in 7 innings. I mean, like that was total domination. Total domination. Did you see what I did with the thumbnail? Did you see that? Did you like that? That was pretty clever, wasn't it? Rustin, what were your thoughts about the baseball game today?
Well, it was over after the second inning. You spot Chase Dollander 12 runs in the first 2 innings, or 11 runs, whatever it was. He's gonna win. Nobody's scoring 11 runs on him. So that was huge. I thought the thing that stood out the most was really 2 things. I love that we carried over their momentum from Friday night into Saturday afternoon. It would have been very easy for them to get overly excited about that comeback win, come out flat, feeling like they had accomplished something, and they came out and just ripped it all over the yard. Probably the thing that stood out to me the most was we scored 17 runs and we only hit 2 home runs. 9 of our 11 hits were singles and doubles. So,
which was the exact opposite from Friday night.
Right. So, everybody was participating, everybody was involved. Christian Moore, this is a box score stat that'll go unnoticed, but Christian Moore walked 3 times and scored all 3 times. It just speaks to when you get runners on in college baseball, it is so imperative. Same for our pitchers. They've got to get outs. If you let extra base runners get on, they're going to kill you. And Christian Moore scoring 3 runs on 3 walks is a lot of production that people just won't pay attention to.
That's a good point. Yeah, I was really, really excited to see them jump out to a lead. And my goodness, 8 runs in the first inning with 2 outs, I think it was.
Yep.
That was just the first inning. I mean, that was incredible. The bats got, you always hear hitting's contagious. Well, it was today, that's for sure. And I'm happy for them that they were able to pull it out. Which, by the way, the game last night, holy moly! You want to talk about a drama-filled game? I mean, it was. Everybody was on the edge of their seats. And then, you come into the bottom of the ninth, down by 2, lead off homer to start the inning. Next 2 guys get out.
And Kavares Tears crushed that ball.
He did.
A no doubter.
Straightaway center. And then, Dreiling gets down 0-2 with 2 outs, and you got the guy at the plate is 0-2, true freshman. And then, a 1-pitch ball, and then the next one, he golfs one off the turf. The ball almost hit the turf.
It was a really good pitch. Like, you can't fault the pitcher on that one. He threw the ball on top of his shoes, and Dylan Dreiling just went down and got it.
And then Chase Burns comes in extra innings, and holy cow, what a performance. That was just, he was the reason why all of a sudden that juice that we saw last year, every game, all of a sudden we saw it again last night for the first time. And you saw it again today. And speaking of today, I think we want to talk about when Christian Moore got ejected in the 7th inning. So, in case nobody saw it, there was a high fly ball down the right field, shallow right field line. Blake Burke drifted back, caught the ball. Dollander was covering first, when
As
he
he should.
ball, and the runner for Vanderbilt tried to get back to the base. And depending on what angle you see it from, because if you saw it from behind, which was the angle we saw it live, it didn't look that bad. It looked like the guy, I mean, to defend that dude, Dolander was literally both feet on top of the base. The guy couldn't get to the base unless he hit the side of it. And so he just did what anybody would have done and come back into the base. But if you see it from the other direction, like from the outfield, you can see him shove Dolander pretty decently there, like that. And that's what Christian Moore saw. So, like the first time you watch it, you're like, why did he react that way? Because it didn't look that big of a deal, because you could see if you saw it from behind. But when you saw it from the perspective Christian Moore saw it from, then you understand more why he reacted that way. Now, we could debate all day long if he should have reacted the way he did, because it ended up getting him ejected, and now he can't play tomorrow. And that's a big deal because they need him in the lineup. I'm assuming now either Kendro or Jaslove is going to start at second tomorrow, but Christian Moore will not be available tomorrow. And you think, I can see this from both sides, both perspectives. On one side, you're like, that was wasted because they're up 17-1 at that time. That it was unnecessary. But the flip side of that coin, that juice that you saw in him at that moment, that's what propelled them to win last night and made them win today and made them play the way they did last year every game. It was that juice, that motivation, that attitude that they had. That's what we saw all year long last year. And so it's a catch-22. I mean, like, part of you is like, man, I wish he hadn't done that because now he can't play tomorrow. But by the same token, that's the kind of stuff that propelled them to success last year. So, and why they won 2 games so far this series. So we'll see what happens. I don't think Kavares Tears will be coming out of the lineup anytime soon.
So I have a little different perspective on the shove.
Go ahead.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And I couldn't care less that he got ejected. And honestly, if Tony Vitello could say what he wanted to say, if you saw his post-game comments, he said, I'm never going to get upset with a guy for defending his teammate. Then he followed it up with, I'm trying to stay out of jail. So
Maui Ahuna, his comments were very telling as well.
Yeah.
He said it didn't matter who, anybody would have had Dolanders back in that situation.
This team all year, their major issue has been lack of leadership. And just in the last week or so, you've seen Hunter Inslee start asserting himself pretty strongly. You've seen Jared Dickey start asserting himself very strongly. Last night, we saw Chase Burns very much being the vocal and motivational leader in those last 3 innings. And I love that Christian Moore said, no, you're not going to bow him up. You're not going to throw a forearm into him. You're not going to shove him. I got you. And the other thing that's a part of this, Christian will absolutely be at the game tomorrow. He just won't be in the dugout while they're playing. So I can guarantee you he will lead every pregame stretch. He will lead every pregame conversation, and he will be the focal point for all the motivation they need to go out there and just beat the ever-loving stew out of Vanderbilt tomorrow. And Tony Vitello is a master motivator. He knows that this is something he can use, and I can promise you, Christian Moore will be front and center right up until the first pitch tomorrow. Then he'll go in the clubhouse where he's supposed to be. But he will be extremely involved tomorrow. And I think this will be the tidal wave. I wouldn't be shocked at all if they come out and run rule them again tomorrow.
I hope they do. That'd be wonderful. I mean, my goodness, they got plenty of arms now. That Dolander threw a complete game today.
Yep.
I mean, they have.
And didn't really use much on Friday night either. I mean, pretty much the entire staff's available.
Right. Exactly. Halverson hasn't made an appearance yet. I mean, you've got so
Kirby
many
Cannell.
options. Yeah, I mean, you got so many options available, so many arms available tomorrow. If Beam or anybody gets in any kind of trouble, I guarantee you're going to see a short lease because they can just go to the next guy because they got 20 of them down there waiting. John said, "Who is this team? Let's keep them this way."
I love it.
I totally agree. Yeah,
They're talking. They're engaged. This is a totally different group. And hey, if it
it's who we saw
snowballs
last year.
yeah, if it snowballs from this point forward and they continue this mentality, they're going to be a tough out.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. You know, it's interesting in that 2 days ago, everybody's wondering, man, they're going to have to scrap and claw to make it to Hoover. I mean, like they were they were going to be in the bottom, few teams that were going to sneak into the SEC tournament. And now we're seeing what we thought we would see all year long. And so hopefully the narrative has changed now. Hopefully the narrative is going to be who's going to stop them, which is what we thought we would be saying all year long. Because we've now seen Dolander, we've now seen Chase Burns have the hitting that was reminiscent of all we saw all year long last year. And so hopefully we're going to keep seeing those things as this year progresses. Anything else about baseball before we move on to softball?
I'll be curious to see who Vanderbilt starts tomorrow. I'll be curious to see if they go right or left, because we have really hurt their right-handers. They have struggled to get outs, so it'll be interesting to see what they go with. They've got their Sunday starters typically been pretty good, but it'll be interesting to see what they choose to do. And like I said, I think you're gonna hear a lot of people post game talking about Christian Moore.
Well, I can guarantee you one thing right now. I'd put money on it right now. The designated hitter hitting cleanup tomorrow is going to be Griffin Merritt, because without Christian Moore in the game, Christian Moore has hit anywhere from second, third, or fourth throughout this season. Well, without him in the game tomorrow, they're going to have another big stick in that lineup in that spot, and it's going to be Griffin Merritt. I mean, it has to be at this point. And they need Griffin Merritt to be the Griffin Merritt that they thought they were getting. That's what they need, and we've seen flashes of it recently, especially last night. So I hope that he is the cleanup hitter, and I hope he has a 2-for-4 or 3-for-4 game. I hope he just he finds his rhythm and finds his groove again.
Their typical Sunday starters left-handed, so the lineup will be definitely stockpiled with right-handers.
Well, moving on to the Lady Vols, they had a tremendous win today too. Here's the thing. I'd be curious to know if anybody knows this watching, hit us with it. But I'd be curious to know how many run rule games the Lady Vols have had so far this year. And then the secondary stat to that is I would be curious to know how many run rule games they've had against top 25 ranked opponents, because they have had a bunch of them. In recent memory, Virginia Tech, Kentucky, Florida. Today, they run ruled Florida. It's the third consecutive. Well, I don't know if they had a midweek. I don't know if they had a midweek game this week. But last week they played Virginia Tech midweek, run ruled them. Then they had the series at Kentucky, run ruled them, and now to start the Florida series, run ruled Florida. It's incredible what they're doing. I mean, incredible.
They beat Kennesaw State midweek 7-3 this week.
There you go.
The thing that should really concern Florida, Ashley Rogers only threw 2 2/3 innings today. They took her out when they got the lead. So that means Florida's got to see her again on Monday.
I mean, it's incredible what they're putting together right now. They're having a season this year reminiscent of the Tennessee baseball team last year. They're dominating everybody.
36-5.
I mean, that's pretty dang good right there. That is incredible. So we hope they keep rolling. And if you've been following along, by the way, we're celebrating. This is our 40th podcast episode today, so that's super exciting. 40 episodes. We so appreciate everybody joining us for those episodes, and we love seeing familiar names comment and everything. That's a lot of fun. Like we saw John comment there a minute ago. It's cool seeing the same people coming back, and that's really really awesome. If you've been following us over the last really 2 months, we've been sporadically throughout our podcasts ending them with position previews for this upcoming season, and we have our last two defensive positions that we're going to preview today. The first defensive position we're going to interview, the first defensive position we're going to preview today is linebackers. Oh, hey, thanks, John. We appreciate it. John said, "Congrats, fellas." Appreciate that, man. We appreciate you joining us, man. We always love it when you chime in. So, linebackers. These two positions, we're going to do linebackers, defensive backs. The linebacker room is one that I am very, very concerned about, honestly, because when you look through the depth chart right now, as it stands right now this spring, and I know that can change, obviously, I get that. But there are only 11 people on the entire roster right now designated as a linebacker, and that includes walk-ons. So not a huge deep room here. The first two guys that'll step on the field are going to be Aaron Beasley and Keenan Peely. I don't think anybody has any doubt about that. For the sake of Tennessee's defense, I sincerely hope those two guys go injury-free the whole year. Because after them, you do have Elijah Herring, and you do have, I looked it up today to make sure I was going to pronounce it right. It's Arion. Like, you got to emphasize the E in the middle. I got that from Tennessee's speak to text, whatever, pronunciation guide. Arion. That's how it is. Arion. And so, I mean, we mentioned this after our Orange and White game reaction show. Arion Carter, dude, he is a house, man. He is we talked about Cam Seldon looking like an 8th-year senior. All right. Well, Arion Carter looks just like him. I mean, that kid, oh my goodness. That dude, he looks like an SEC linebacker right now. And he should be in the last semester of his high school career. So that's really exciting. It's also kind of concerning that the backup linebacker and one of the first guys off the bench is going to be a true freshman. Hopefully that means, he's just incredible. But we'll see. I think for everybody, we need to really, really hope that Aaron Beasley and
Keenan Peely
are both injury-free the whole year. I think that's really what we need to hope for. What do you think about the linebackers?
I'm terrified of them. I think the first two are incredible players, but everything behind it is completely unproven. And we have 15-8. We have 23 days to go find another linebacker in the portal, and I sure hope they do.
I mean, I got to think they will. Like, I mean, surely they will.
Because there is no depth in there. Elijah Herring is probably going to be a really good player, and I think the step from freshman to sophomore year, I think we're going to see a huge step from him, and I think he'll end up playing major minutes and probably play really, really well. But, you just mentioned the number 4 backer as a freshman. Right now, the top 6, there's 2 true freshmen in there. And if they're being honest, like they probably want to redshirt Jalen Smith, but if worse comes to worse, he could very quickly be pushed into action because there's just not a whole lot of guys there. I fully expect Beasley and Peely to be 1 and 2, Herring and Carter to be second group, and Caleb Perry and Jeremiah Thielander to be the third group.
Agreed.
That's just a lot of unproven guys. They've got a couple other guys that they can look at. The transfer from Liberty, Caleb Williams, and people have continued to say the name Ben Bolton. That he's had a great spring, and that coaches have been pleasantly surprised with him. But again, when your first two are absolutely proven, they are studs. They are going to be NFL players. But your next six, it's a coin toss.
So Aaron Beasley put his name on every single NFL team's radar last year during the Orange Bowl. That was his coming out party, and he was the man on the field during that game. I mean, that was an incredible game by him. So many tackles for loss. I mean, just absolutely phenomenal game. John said, "I cannot wait to see what Beasley does this year." I like that. We're going to use that. I like that a lot. That's good. I can't either. I mean, they need him to stay healthy in a real bad way. Because think about this. Last year you had Juwan Mitchell and Jeremy Banks running out there, and then Aaron Beasley coming in. I mean, they rotated a bunch of dudes at linebacker last year, and they were coming in and out, almost swapping series and that kind of stuff. I mean, I will say this: it is good that Arion Carter, even his teammates have mentioned him so far this year in the spring. That's been good. That's good. But I 100% agree with you. Over the next 2 weeks, they got to find somebody in the portal. Like they just have to.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the one position where I think it is necessary. You got to find somebody just for depth purposes, because if anybody gets injured, whoa boy.
So if they don't, I think what that should tell everybody, if you go way back to our recruiting episode, I made a really big deal about Jeremiah Telander. I think he's SEC ready. I think he is going to be a big-time player at Tennessee. If they don't go get somebody in the portal, then that means Jeremiah Telander is the real deal, and they're totally fine playing him as a freshman.
Yep. Any other thoughts about the linebackers before we move on to defensive backs?
I think the wild card's Caleb Perry.
Agreed.
He looked pretty decent in the spring game. It's hard to tell. It's a spring game. But although I will say today's Alabama spring game, Nick Saban will actively be in the transfer portal for the next 23 days because he got to find him a quarterback. So I think I'm curious to see the growth of Caleb Perry. He looks the part, and he seems to have really good instincts. And I could see him playing major minutes if he continues the consistency that we've seen to this point.
Well, they need him to. They need every person they can get a linebacker right now. Well, moving on to defensive backs. So this one is the most intriguing of all the defensive positions to me.
Yep.
Because I think everybody could agree, based on last year's performance, this is the group that needed to improve the most and needed help the most. But I'm going to say something here. Well, first I'm going to read people listed right now on the roster right now, which I know that can change. I don't think it will with the defensive back room, but I know it could. But people listed on the roster right now that will be playing this fall. Listen to the experience and depth of age in this group. I'm just going to go number order down the roster here. Danico Slaughter, senior. Jalen McCullough, either fifth or sixth year senior.
Yeah.
D. Williams, senior. Which that one still baffles me how he never even really stepped on the field last year as a defensive back. Warren Burrell, redshirt senior. Kamal Haddon, redshirt senior. Brandon Turnage, redshirt senior. Let's see. Gabe Judy Lawley, redshirt senior. Tamarian McDonald, senior. Wesley Walker, redshirt senior. Christian Charles, junior. Andre Turrentine, redshirt sophomore, so essentially a junior. And then from that point forward, you get, freshman, redshirt freshman, that kind of thing. So here's my opinion on this. As we saw last year, did I mention Christian Charles Jr.?
Yep.
I think I skipped him. Maybe I didn't. So as we think about last year, I mean, in the system that we know Tennessee runs most frequently, there's going to be 5 defensive backs on the field at all times. Now, of those 5, so it has to be a deep room. It has to be, because you got to have people out there. As we saw last year, you get injuries at 2 or 3 or 4 spots, because at one point they had like 4 or 5 injuries with their starters. You end up with walk-ons playing in the most important defensive drive of the season as Alabama's marching down the field to kick a go-ahead field goal that thankfully they missed. We had a walk-on at safety for that series, that drive. But I'm going to go back to what what's the guy's name? Oh my goodness. Jimmy Dykes. So Jimmy Dykes said this at the very first game of the year in the basketball season this year. It was the Colorado game, Tennessee against Colorado. And he said, Tennessee is a whole year older, but he's like, listen, just because you're 1 year older doesn't mean you're 1 year better. And I was like, man, booyah. He just hit the nail on the head. Just because you're older doesn't mean you're better. So here's my opinion on this. There should not be. I mean, how many people did I just mention that were either a junior, a senior, or a redshirt senior? I mean, my goodness, 10 or 11? I mean, it was like tons of them. So nobody, I would be very curious to see if any other SEC team has that many people in their secondary that are seniors or redshirt seniors or even 6th-year seniors. I'd be very curious to see that. No one should be able to throw the ball on Tennessee like they were last year. But here's the thing. It's still the same guys back there. So have they gotten better? That's the question. And I mean, that to me is going to be the single biggest question that we answer this fall. Now, I do want to answer John's question real quick, because I think he's just asked a really good question. So do you guys think we'll be much better at cornerback, specifically at corner? Okay. Yes, no doubt about it. And I'm going to explain why. Safety? I don't know. Here's why I'm going to say confidently yes at corner. His name's Gabe Judy Lawley. He was as far as like Rustin found this stat last year or a few months ago when Gabe transferred, of the 290 something possible cornerbacks in the country in defensive pass efficiency, he was ranked 92nd out of almost 300 guys.
And it was only the 300 who qualified. There's way more than that. It was the top 300 corners in the country. He was number 92.
I mean, he can legit play. He can legit play. And so I am very, very excited to see what he's able to do. The other corner is going to be Danico Slaughter. I'll be shocked if it's not. We saw last year, the last 2 games of the season, when there were so many injuries in the defensive secondary, Danico, who was normally, they call it the star in Tennessee's defense. Everybody else call it a nickel probably. Danico had been playing that star position. He was forced to move over to corner because they just didn't have any other people out there. Like, they had no one else. And man, he showed up big time. That was a really nice thing to see last year was Danico, how well he succeeded at corner. He played a tremendous game. I mean, we all think back to the Kentucky game. He had a beautiful interception down the sideline on Will Levis. Then the Vanderbilt, and especially in the Orange Bowl, he showed that he was claiming a spot at corner. And so I think if the first two corners that trot out on the field this year are going to be Danico Slaughter and Gabe Judy Lawley, and that's a really good duo. I feel very comfortable with that duo. It's a safety that I'm very concerned on. Well, not very concerned, but that I think there are more question marks. For example, Jalen McCullough is he a 6th-year senior?
Yeah,
5th-year.
He's a super senior.
That's what I thought. So Jalen's a 6th-year senior. But is he going to be better than he was last year? I mean, just because you're 1 year older doesn't mean you're 1 year better. They need him to be better than he was last year. What they really need is for Jalen McCullough to have a Theo Jackson type year that Theo had two seasons ago, where he ends up getting himself drafted because he just bursts onto the scene the way. I mean, my goodness, I remember the first 2 games of Theo Jackson's season 2 years ago. All of a sudden, it's like, whoa, dude is all over the place. And he was in the backfield making tackles in the backfield on, tosses to running backs and stuff. He came out of nowhere. And they need Jalen McCullough to have that kind of year this year. Big time. They really need him to really break out this year. And then at the other spot, you got, you have 2 other spots with the star and the other safety position. Is it going to be Wesley Walker? Is it going to be will Brandon Turnage be the star? Will it be Andre Turrentine or will it be Tamari McDonald? I mean, you have so many options. Hopefully somebody asserts themselves as the dude. My question is Jalen McCullough even going to be starting? I think he probably will be, but it'll be interesting to see if Wesley Walker and Tamari McDonald step up like, no, we got it. It'll be, or Andre Turrentine. I mean, there's so many questions back there apart from the corners, the other 3 spots, the 2 safeties and the star. There's so many questions. And of course, time will tell the answer, but I think that is the most intriguing part of the secondary talk. And man, I hope that all that experience really pays off for him.
So one thing we know about Willie Martinez, he loves to cross train. He loves to teach guys multiple positions. He likes to recruit guys that can play multiple positions, really for 2 reasons. Number one, it just creates natural depth. You can have your best players out there at all times when you need them, because they can play any position in the backfield. But the other thing it does, and they haven't shown this a lot because of just issues in the front in the past, it allows you to play a lot more man. And the reason it allows you to play a lot more man is you can start identifying the matchups you want, and you can alter your personnel to fit the matchups you want. So, for example, Tamarion McDonald is a pretty good cover guy, but he's nowhere near as good as Brandon Turnage. So if you decided you were going to go straight man under with 1 safety over the top, you're probably going to see more Brandon Turnage than Tamarion McDonald at the star because he can play man better. So I think what you're going to see is you're going to see a lot of guys. I was kind of stunned. I counted it up. They have 21 scholarship defensive backs. That's a lot. Typically it's around 18, 19. 21 means they made a concerted effort that they were going to go stockpile talent back there. I think the one thing that's interesting, if you look at the possible depth chart, they have 5, maybe 6 true freshman defensive backs that they may not need to step on the field at all. And so they may redshirt all of them. The other thing that's interesting, out of that 21 scholarship guys, only 5 of them absolutely have to graduate. So 16 of them at least are coming back next year, maybe 15, depending on what Gabe Jeudy-Lally does. But technically, 16 of the 21 could be back next year, even though they're an extremely veteran group. So, I know they're really excited about the young guys. The 6 freshmen are all just absolute dogs. They are versatile kids that can play multiple positions. You got guys like Jordan Matthews, Christian Conyer, Cameron Miller, John Slaughter, Jack Luttrell, Ricky Gibson Jr. Like, there's some dudes in that freshman class. But the absolute best thing that could happen is if all 6 of them could redshirt and the remaining 15 cover the 5 defensive secondary positions. But it may not even take that many. They might be able to get away with 11 or 12, because when you look at the depth chart, Tank McCullough is definitely going to be at one of the safeties. The other one is probably going to be Wesley Walker. Tamarian McDonald is probably going to be the star. And then, like you said, Jeudy-Lally and Danico Slaughter are probably going to be the corners. But Danico Slaughter can also play the star. Brandon Turnage can also play the star. Brandon Turnage can also play corner. Brandon Turnage can also play safety. So he can play multiple spots. Jordan Thomas.
We've seen him do that in his time at Tennessee so far.
Yeah. Yeah, he can do them all. Jordan Thomas is a year older and a year better. We're probably going to see him get more snaps at safety. Wesley Walker can play the star. You've got guys, you've got true corners in Warren Burrell and Kamal Haddon, that if they have an injury issue somewhere else, either one of those guys have played a lot of snaps. They can walk in, play the corner, and allow Danico Slaughter to slide over and help in one of the other slots. Christian Charles can play safety or corner. There's just a lot of versatility there. And I think we're going to see a lot of mixing and matching. I think you're going to see people changing in and out based on the coverage they're calling. I think you're going to see people changing in and out based on who they're covering. And that's Willie Martinez loves that. He loves having that versatility. To answer John's question, do I think that we'll be better at corner? Yes, because we're going to have one of the best pass rushes in the SEC. And secondaries are good if the defensive line is good. And our defensive line is one of the best in the country.
So welcome, the only 10 you see. I appreciate you joining us. They asked, I noticed that the corners don't play very physical in bump and run coverage. Is that due to personnel, or are they coached away from that? Okay, so I think I have an answer. What do you think, Rustin?
It's definitely personnel. They have not been comfortable with who they've had in the backfield. They've also been very injury riddled. And so, when you play a lot of bump and run, you twist a lot of ankles, you get little nicks and dings. And I think they've been concerned about depth. And so they've intentionally avoided playing man, but they've built the depth. They've definitely got the depth to do it now. So we should be seeing a lot more of that. And again, we've talked about the Keenan Peely quote. A couple weeks ago, he said this is one of the most aggressive defenses he's ever been a part of. Well, the only way you're aggressive is if you're playing a lot of man.
Yeah, that's right. That's a fantastic question. Thank you so much for asking that. That's an awesome question. And it's a great name as well. So we appreciate it very much. And I totally agree with Rustin. That makes a lot of sense. Thanks, guys. Anytime. Thank you so much for joining us. And I totally agree with Rustin. The reason, if you're going to play really tight bump and run man-to-man coverage, that means that your defensive line has to be living in the backfield because you have to be getting pressure with the defensive line in order to be able to do that on the outside. And we have not been able to do that in, a lot of years, unfortunately, that we could say. I mean, we saw glimpses of it last year. The problem last year was that we had 6 defensive backs who weren't able to finish the season because they were injured.
Yep.
And so this year we have way more depth on defensive line than we've had in who knows how long. We have dudes that can get to the quarterback, we hope. based on what we saw last year, based on the guys we got coming in. So hopefully with the improved defensive line being able to get to the quarterback, that would allow the secondary to play more tight bump and run coverage, and we'll see an even better defense. I hope. That's the hope. Now, I do want to go ahead.
I think the thing that people should be really excited about is Amari McNeil entering the transfer portal. And that's not a knock on Amari. He played a lot of good snaps last year, but anybody and everybody around the program, when they're asked why did Amari McNeil enter the portal, they always keep saying the same two names, Omar Norman Lott and David Hobbs. The fact that Amari McNeil sees that those two guys are so good, they're going to take all of his snaps is a huge positive for Tennessee fans. We thought the defensive line was going to be stout. The fact that those two are already showing out to the point that guys are entering the transfer portal because they know they're going to take all their snaps. This is going to be one of the best defensive lines in the entire country.
Certainly the deepest. And when you think about, and let's go back to this when we talk about defensive backs. If we're talking about the frequency that Tennessee's defense is on the field, as we all know, that's been a major talking point for 2 seasons because the offense scores so fast. I mean, they get the ball and no joke, 20 to 30 seconds later, they're in the end zone. And so here comes the defense right back on the field. If you think about the 3 layers of the defense, defensive line, linebackers, and secondary, I think we could. I mean, listen, they're all running all over the place all the time. Okay, that's the bottom line. They are. But as far as the quantity of field is concerned, I think we could probably all agree the secondary is running all over the place. You know, if dude's running a go route down the sideline, that corner is running 40 to 50 yard sprints on that play. You know, and I mean, people can say, well, you know, linebackers are going side to side too, and yeah, they sure are. They're all running all over the place. You know, defensive line, that's probably the most physically demanding spot on defense because, I mean, it's a battle every single snap. And when you think about the 2 positions we are deepest at right now on our defensive side of the ball, it's the secondary and it's defensive line. And so maybe, hopefully, this year we will see more fresh bodies in the game more frequently. And that whole conversation about, man, the defenses have been on the field so much, it won't be that big of a deal because, yeah, they were on the field a whole lot, but they were only on the field every other possession or something like that. You know, they had guys coming in to give them a quick breather. I mean, you know, Rustin, we're talking about the defensive back. He mentioned a minute ago, yeah, Danico Slaughter and Gabe Judy Lawley are certainly going to be the starters. But you've got 2 guys coming in behind them, and Kamal Haddon and Warren Burrell Jr., who have started multiple games. So they were the starting duo at the beginning of the season last year. I mean, like, so
yep,
you've got good quality depth behind them. So hopefully that's going to allow our defense to stay fresher. That's going to keep them active the whole game long. That's the hope.
I'll be curious to see how the new rule change that went into effect a couple of days ago helps our defense. And honestly, I think it will help our defense because how many times
shorten the games?
Yeah, and they're expecting it'll shorten it by 10 to 12 plays. So how many times last year, for those of you who don't know what I'm referring to, earlier this week, the NCAA passed the NFL rule essentially that after a first down, the clock will not stop. They'll stop it to spot the ball, and then it starts back up again. Whereas in the past, you know, they have a little bit of time after every first down. It's going to eliminate about 10 to 12 plays a game. How many times last year did we see teams that we jumped on really quickly, scored fast, and all of a sudden they did some unconventional things to try to keep up? You know, teams going for it on fourth down in the end of the first quarter, middle of the second quarter, because they're terrified that if they don't get a first down and keep a drive going, that they just can't keep up with our scoring. So they do
You
things
saw
out of
Florida
the,
do it the whole game last year.
yeah. So they do things out of the ordinary because they're terrified that they can't keep up with us. Okay, well, is winding a clock faster going to slow down our offense? No, because our offense doesn't care about the clock anyway. So that 10 to 12 snaps a game that are going to disappear are pretty much all going to come from the other sideline. Well, if that other sideline was already having to do really unconventional things to try to play keep up, now they're going to have to start throwing the ball a lot more. They're going to get a lot more predictable because they're going to have to try to keep pace with us. That means defensive line gets the opportunity to pin their ears back more often and just go because they know what's coming. Secondary, it's a whole lot easier to play when you know what's coming. And so I think the new rule change is actually going to play to our advantage. And I think 2 years from now, we're going to have coaches who don't run the hurry up complaining about the rule change and trying to get it switched back to the old way because they can't get enough plays in to keep up.
I think that's an awesome point. I think that's a really good perspective on that. I was thinking about that the other day, and well, I totally just lost my train of thought. You said something, and it triggered something in my memory, and I was like, "Oh yeah," and now I can't remember what I was going to say.
Just the weirdness of how unconventional people are when they play us.
Yeah, maybe that. Well, that's a shame. It was good. I thought it was a good point. Can't remember it now though. That's all right. But yeah, I mean that's going to bug me now.
I think it's going to be a huge advantage for teams like Tennessee that play fast, and I think
that's what it was.
I think it's going to have the reverse effect of what these other people were hoping it would do.
So, speaking of the defensive backs, Reed Carringer made a really good point when we had him on our show earlier this week. And if you haven't seen that yet, I'd strongly recommend you go watch that interview. Reed is the guy who does this magazine. This is, the magazine everybody looks forward to every year, Football Time in Tennessee magazine. And so his family, they're the ones who produced that magazine. He was on our show Thursday, actually, is when that show was released. And he made a really good point about the defensive backs. He said, last year, those numbers are inflated because teams were so frequently having to play from behind against Tennessee that, they had to throw the ball over and over and over and over. So those numbers are not really fair to the secondary because that's all teams were doing was just throwing. And, Rustin, you made a good point with the new rule change. I mean, if teams are losing even more snaps against us and they're having to throw the ball even more and more and more, our rushing statistics are probably going to be really good. Our defensive rushing statistics, because you can't run the ball and you got to throw it so much.
You know what's coming.
Yeah. I mean, like that, you running backs coming into Neyland Stadium are probably like, oh man, because they know they're probably not going to get a whole lot of snaps and a whole lot of handoffs. Let's see. So Austin said, I had not thought about it that way, Rustin. Solid point. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. That's a great point. John said, so you're saying Nick's have you seen, okay, there's a company, I can't remember. I think it's called Smack Talk Shirts, I think is the name of it. They've partnered with Josh Mancuso, and there's a Not Today Saban shirt like that. That's pretty good. So you think Nick is going to whine even more? Sure hope so. If he is, that means we're winning.
I'll tell you, he's got a problem. It was interesting. So earlier this week, I'm a big fan of Greg McElroy and Cole Kublik. I try to listen to their show every day. Earlier this week, Greg McElroy made a comment on the air that Alabama is not settled at quarterback. Somebody called in and said, how do you think the quarterback controversy is going to go? And Greg McElroy's response was, we don't have a controversy because we don't have a quarterback. That's an Alabama quarterback saying we don't have a quarterback. And then today, the Alabama spring game, Jalen Milroe and Ty Simpson went out and proved it. They could not possibly have played worse, both of them. So Saban's going to have to get in the portal and find somebody, and literally his sales pitch is going to be, you're the starter right now. It's going to be fascinating to watch that unfold, because he's got two quarterbacks that both think they should start, and neither of them are playing well at all.
Well, and I mean, let's be honest, at this point in the portal, you are not going to be able to get somebody from another team that has been solidified as their starter. It's just not going to happen.
Unless you've got a really convenient bag man that can go out and throw an NIL deal at somebody without their school's knowledge.
The only thing you see said, do you see more coaches trying to emulate our fast-paced offense in the SEC due to this rule change? All right. You are asking some awesome questions. I'm loving this. I love this, man. This is great. Are we just ahead of the curve and benefiting from that? Okay, so Rustin, you go ahead, and then I'm going to mention what Reed said on the show Thursday. You go ahead.
People already are. Clemson has completely moved to our offense after getting smoked by us in the Orange Bowl. They were like, well, if you can't beat them, join them. And they went out and hired a former Heupel assistant to bring the system in. So Clemson's already running it. You'll see Ole Miss, if Lane can ever get somebody connected to Heupel back, like when he had Jeff Lebby, you'll see a lot more of it there. He wants to do more of it. He just doesn't have the personnel on staff to pull it off right now. So Ole Miss definitely wants to. It's interesting how Nick Saban and Kirby Smart are kind of taking a step backwards. They hired offensive coordinators that want to be a 3 yards in a cloud of dust, play action, pound the ball, and kind of boring offenses. It'll be interesting to see how that unfolds, and if they end up having to make a switch to keep up. Poor Mississippi State. I like Zach Arnett. He's a really good defensive coordinator, but the only thing that's kept them in games for the last several years is the air raid. And so he goes out and fires the air raid staff and brings in a pro-style staff. So you can pretty much be guaranteed Mississippi State's going 4-8 this year. They're going to be terrible. Vanderbilt's Vanderbilt. They just can't. It doesn't matter what they do. They're not going to keep up. Kentucky, I could see Kentucky adopting some of, especially if Liam Cohen stays for a while. Liam Cohen is a genius offensive mind. If they can keep him there for a while, I could see him adopting some of Heupel's concepts, because he's just a junkie. He watches X's and O's like crazy, and he's always adapting what he does. South Carolina, Clemson's doing it, so South Carolina will be doing it soon because they're going to have to keep up. Florida's got issues. Florida needs to figure out what offense they're running first, and then worry about if it's going to be fast paced enough to keep up. LSU definitely has some components of it. They've been talking about how they're spreading it out and going to try a little more air raid type concepts. I think you're across the conference. You're going to continue to see more and more schools either go the route of Alabama and Georgia and say, we're going to pound it, we're going to eat the clock, and we don't care what y'all do, this is how we play. Or they're going to go the route of Tennessee and be like, we're going to air it out, we're going to spread it out, we're going to go as fast as we can. And I think there's not going to be a middle ground. It's going to be one or the other.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that, Reed mentioned this Thursday night. I think he was right as well. People have talked about Heupel's offense as gimmicky. And, it's just, it's the scheme. It's just a gimmicky scheme. At some point, repeatedly being the number one overall offense in the SEC is no longer gimmicky. At some point, it's no longer it's just the scheme. Now, at some point, it's because it's really good. like it's a really effective offense at some point, you know. I mean, we talked about how Reed brought up a good point. You know, Heupel's first year at Missouri, the year before he got there, Missouri was the last place offense in the SEC, dead last. In his first year as offensive coordinator at Missouri, they were the number one offense. So they went from last to first in 1 year with Josh Heupel. I mean, and then he comes to Tennessee. And Tennessee in back-to-back years have just put up video game numbers on offense. At some point, it's no longer gimmicky. And people are going to have to take notice of that and say, okay, whatever he's doing, it apparently works really well. We got to do that too. And so, I mean, my goodness, I mean, you think about people have even proposed rule changes, and then other people have tried to shoot him down just to try to slow down his offense. I'm thinking of the proposed changes about if a player goes down as an injured player during the series, that they can no longer come back into that series. They have to wait until at least the next series, because people were faking injuries. And, you know, we saw Lane Kiffin literally tell a player, go down, right? Like 2 years ago, he did that. And that's on camera. You can see him saying it. And so teams have repeatedly faked injuries against Tennessee just to slow them down. And people have said, hey, we got to change this. If it really is about player safety, if a player goes down on a series, then they need to go out for the rest of that series, just for their safety, you know. And then the rules committee didn't change anything. There were enough, you know, voices out there saying, no, we need to keep it that way. I totally agree with Rustin. You're going to see more and more teams having to adapt to what Heupel's doing, because there's no arguing that it is far and away an effective offense. It is not a gimmick. That's for sure.
The NFL is $1 billion industry. And the amount of people, we talked about this with Reed, the amount of people who mentioned that at UT's Pro Day, I mean, there was just an obscene amount of reporters and media and different people who mentioned the number of NFL teams that were spending a lot of time with Josh Heupel, not to talk about his players, but to talk about scheme. The NFL does not copy something unless they know it's going to work. And the fact that because their livelihoods depend on it. You know, the fact that many people were commenting on how many NFL executives, coaches were just spending a lot of time with Josh Heupel, picking his brain about the system. I think you might see it faster in the NFL than you do in the SEC, because those guys want to win and they want to find any little thing they can to maintain their jobs and keep the money flowing.
So I'm proposing something here for the only 10 you see. I think we need to do a whole show of just your questions. So our email address is thevolbros@gmail.com. We will do, you are asking some awesome questions. And so if you want to email us, we'll just do like a whole show and dedicate it to you and your questions, because I'm loving it, man. It's great. I'm loving these questions. They're really good. Austin, welcome, Austin. And this got a comment from him earlier too. It's good to see him back. He said Saban is a quintessential. Now this was in reference to Saban moving backward and going farther away from a speed high, tempo offense. Saban is quintessential get off my lawn guy. Life passing by, he ain't happy about it. That may be referring to the tantrum he threw on the sideline in Neyland last year as well. John referencing Texas A&M, which Bobby Petrino now at Texas A&M. He said if Jimbo's can get out of the way, A&M will probably be up, better too, up tempo too. That's a good question.
That's gonna be must see TV. I do not know how that's gonna unfold because if Jimbo Fisher really turns over play calling, I will be stunned. And
100%. Yeah.
and Bobby Petrino is not going to sit in the box and give ideas. Like
Yeah.
he is just as egotistical as Jimbo. That is a train wreck waiting to happen.
100% agree. Because I mean, let's be honest. Jimbo, that's been his thing. He has been the offensive guy everywhere he's been.
Yep.
Including the national championship game at Florida State. He was calling plays in that national championship game. I mean, that's been his thing. And this last year was the first year where it's been kind of been like, whoa, it may be time to release the reins a little bit. So you bring in Bobby Petrino, who has proven, even in recent years, to be able to put up some points on the board. It'll be interesting to see what happens because those offensive meetings are going to be very sensitive and touchy. If Jimbo says, "I don't think we should do that," there were stories of Pruitt, and when he was at Tennessee, where he would walk into the quarterbacks room with Jim Chaney and the quarterbacks, and they're talking about what the game plan was for the weekend. Pruitt was like, "No, I don't want to do that." That's not going to be helpful for if Jimbo takes the same approach at A&M with Bobby Petrino.
So I won't name names, but I can attest that this happened. I know firsthand that this happened. There was a game plan in place that the team practiced the entire week with one quarterback starting. Jeremy Pruitt walked in the offensive meeting room on Thursday and told the offensive staff, that quarterback's not starting, this one is. The entire game plan for that Saturday, 48 hours away, was structured around the quarterback they thought was starting. And the one that he forced them to start could not execute the game plan.
That's a really healthy scenario you had there. Unbelievable. Hey, Zach, what's up, buddy? Zach said, good evening. I've been on vacation, but I'm back. How are you guys tonight? That's what I'm talking about. We're doing great, Zach. Hey, baseball's dominated. Lady Vols dominated. It's a good night, man. That's good to see you again, man. Good to have you back. Brent said, Brent, good to have you back too. He said, it's always a great day when you plaster Vandy at the only sport they are decent. That's pretty good. I like that. It's a good day. Absolutely. John said for an injury, they cannot allow. So we were talking about the proposed, rule changes last summer that didn't get passed, that should have gotten passed, but they didn't get passed, is in that, if someone goes down as an injury during a series, they have to exit the field for the remainder of that series, and they cannot come back until at least the next series. And so John said for an injury, they cannot allow more than one person to be substituted. Lane Kiffin put 3-4 players in for one flopper. Yeah, I mean, they would all of a sudden. That's a great point. If somebody goes down, you could essentially sub your entire defensive line if you wanted to. And I agree. One guy, just that one dude. I get that totally. The only 10 you see said email coming your way. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you so much. That's what I'm talking about. Zach said Tennessee Crest. I love it, man. This is why I like having Zach on the show. Like pure, unbridled Tennessee optimism. I love it. And Tennessee crushes A&M 56-10. Mark it. Now
that A&M, game, he is predicting a score for a game that is in 6 months.
Yeah, he is. That's what I'm talking about.
That is October 14th.
I love it. We need to do a whole show of just Zach's predictions for the whole season. That would get all of All Nation pumped up.
I do think we do need to. I saw an episode the other day of another show, and I think we need to do it. I do think we need to do a SEC records prediction episode and go through the entire SEC and predict what each one's final record will be.
That'd be really cool. I'd love to do that. Zach said, "Cut my arm and I'll bleed orange." That's what I'm talking about, baby. See, that's what I'm saying. I mean, Zach would get all of All Nation, but Zach, okay. We always hear about like the locker pregame speeches that Al Wilson gives, and it's like, everybody's like, "Man, this is like the best pregame speech I've ever heard." They need to put you in there, Zach. Like they need to put you in there, and because you would just get them pumped up. You get me pumped up, man. I'm loving it. I'm so glad you're back with us, Zach. That's awesome, man. It's been a while since we got to see you on here, so I'm glad you're back. You're the man. You're the man. John, hey, this is a great idea. I like this idea. He said, hit the like button, subscribe, and share. That is a wonderful idea. John is encouraging all of us to do what we say all the time. Hey, text a buddy. Danny White said so. Text a buddy. Tell him about the Vol Bros. I think that's a wonderful idea. Sharing it, super easy. You just hit the share button and it's on social media for you right there. That'd be awesome. I'm serious, Zach. I'm loving having you back. Man, it's awesome. Go Big Orange. That's right. That's right. So we went away from the defensive backs. Did you want to say anything else about defensive backs in our preview?
No. Yeah. I think if they can stay healthy, the combination of how good the defensive line will be and their overall depth, I think they're going to be fine. I honestly, again, I think the biggest question mark on defense is linebacker, and not so much the starters. Just if one of them goes down, can we survive the next group?
That's exactly right. It's what we saw last year with defensive backs and injuries is potentially what could happen this year with linebackers. And we got to hope it doesn't. I mean, we got to hope it doesn't. And I'm going to say this too. I also hope it doesn't for Keenan Peely's sake and for Aaron Beasley's sake, because those two dudes, they know this is their money year. Like this is it. They think that, they know if they want to get drafted, it's this year. Keenan Peely, I mean, he even said that when, if anybody didn't see his Vol Club Confidential interview with VolQuest, I'd recommend you go back and watch it, because he knows what this year is for him. He came here on purpose. He's going to try to make a living based on his performance this year for the NFL draft. And so, for his sake and for our defense's sake, they need him on the field, because they need his leadership on the field. They need his football IQ on the field. They need him on the field. Zach said, question for you after spring game. Do you think it's a 3 QB race? I love it.
If Gaston Moore is smart, he gets a NIL deal for the next, what is this, April, May, June, July, for the next 3 months. He gets an NIL deal and sells as many Gaston for Heisman t-shirts as he can possibly sell. Because once practice starts and reality sets in again, nobody will be making these comments anymore. But for the next 3 months, he's got a cash cow on his hands.
No one throws like Gaston. Seriously, you get some like Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, like shirts, and talk about him, put a football in his hand. I mean, Disney probably wouldn't like that, but
no, I'm pretty sure you just violated about 18 copyright issues.
Probably so, but it'd sell, that's for sure. Gaston Moore could sell him. He was slinging it, man, in the orange and white game. Zach said he was watching it in Mexico. That's what I'm talking about. International traveling right there, baby. So, it's an exciting time to be involved, because I will say this, we just finished our previews for all the offensive positions, all the defensive positions, where, I'll snip out the 2 positions we did tonight and put those online in our series that we did. We have a whole playlist on our channel right now of all our position previews for 2023. And if you go back and you watch them, you'll see one thing that was different tonight than all the rest of them. And for the first time tonight, we said that there is a position group that is not deep at all. This is the first time we've said that, because if you look at running backs, this might be the deepest running back room we've had in literal decades. If you look at the wide receiver room, unbelievably deep, just like it was last year. If you look at quarterback, really, really deep. If you look at, because I mean, you got three guys there, and I think we can make it through the year with three. If you look at defensive line, maybe the deepest defensive line we've had in, oh goodness, 20 years.
Mid-90s.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking like 2001, 2002, back to that range. Maybe not the same quality of like individual guys that, you know, there's no Big John Henderson or something like that, but the sheer quantity of guys that we can put out there with very little drop off in talent.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of the deepest. Same thing with running back. You know, it's a quantity and situation. You know, and there's so many of them. Secondary, it should be a deep position. The only one that we cannot say is deep is linebacker. And so we just got to hope that Beasley and Peely, that they stay healthy. Yeah, funny you say it because you remind me of Gaston. That's cool. I appreciate it. So what time do the Vols play tomorrow? Baseball team? I can't remember.
I believe they're the 1 o'clock game.
If anybody knows that's watching right now, you can tell us. I probably should have looked that up before I started closing the show.
I'll tell you shortly. Yep, 1 o'clock on ESPN2.
There you go. Hey, I tell you what. Don't underestimate this. You know, lately, a lot of the series, even against Florida, against Arkansas, against LSU, at least one of the games was on SEC Network Plus or the ESPN app. All three games this series have been nationally televised, and teams have gotten to see Tennessee just play extremely well. More importantly than that, the NCAA selection committee has gotten to see Tennessee play really, really well. The national media has gotten to see Tennessee play really, really well.
The top recruits in America have watched Tennessee beat the snot out of Vanderbilt.
Yep,
that's
number 4 ranked Vanderbilt. Yep. So don't underestimate that. Like those nationally televised games, that's a big deal. And it's good that Tennessee's playing that well right now, because that can only help them on Monday when the new rankings come out. And those matter, because I mean, it's gonna end up impacting. They're not going to get to host a regional this year. I think we could all safely assume that it's not happening. But that's going to determine if there are 2 or 3 seeds somewhere else, you know, and that's a big difference between a 2 and a 3 seed. So, well, I mean, I meant a 3 and a 4 seed. So 2 and a 3 is going to be playing each other anyway. But it's a big deal. It's a big deal that they're getting to see that. So hopefully they do it again tomorrow. Hopefully they keep that swagger about them. They keep that juice that they had. And hopefully they put it on them. Any last thoughts before we sign off, Rustin?
No. What a great day to be a Vol. Spring practice concludes. You know, we didn't talk about it tonight, but we will next week. The Vols and Lady Vols both have been stockpiling talent. You know,
basketball teams.
Yep. Baseball's picking Vanderbilt apart at the seams. Lady Vol softball beat up on Florida. I mean, I don't know if you saw, the golf team is actually pretty much obliterating Mississippi State in their first round match for the SEC championship. So, you know, everybody on the hill is playing well.
So they had a freshman, I think it was a true freshman, win the title in golf it's like the first time in, I can't remember how long, maybe ever. I can't remember, but I saw that tweet the other day. True freshman for Tennessee won the SEC title in golf. Yeah. That's awesome, man. That's really good. All right. Well, hey, we appreciate all you so much for joining us. This is so much fun. We love it. This is our 40th episode. That's super exciting. So we got plans. I got plans in mind for the 50th coming up so soon. So that'll be on the pace that we're averaging right now. That'll probably end up being in about
5 weeks,
seven, probably 6 or 7 weeks. And so somewhere in there, because we're typically doing about 2 shows, so maybe 5. But so that I'm excited about that. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure hanging out with you guys. We hope all of you have a wonderful, wonderful evening and a very, very great Sunday. Go Vols, go Lady Vols. We got another round of games tomorrow in Knoxville. Baseball hosting Vanderbilt. Ladies Vols softball hosting Florida. Top 25 ranked opponents. So hopefully, hey, that'd be awesome if we get back-to-back run rule days for both teams. That'd be incredible. So hope everybody has a great evening. Go Vols.